Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and on today's episode we're going to align the front end of my Mini now that we've got that steering rack installed. So stay tuned. Okay, like I said, we're going to be aligning the car today. Now before we get started, I do have a few disclaimers that I do want to add. One, I have fixed negative camber lower control arms. So I used to have fully adjustable lower control arms. I've swapped those out since my accident, since that guy ran me off the road, and those are fixed at 1.2 degrees of negative camber, I think is what they are set to. It's really, really nice to be able to just know that that's set, it's fixed, it's already ready. So the only piece of real adjustable nature that I have in my suspension are two things. One is the front tie rod, and the other is the steering rack. The steering rack being, of course, the tie rod ends on the end that you can rotate in and rotate out. You might remember in the steering rack replacement video, I showed you guys a little chart. That chart shows, how many turns I had on each side of the steering rack in order to get it relatively center. Now, before we dive into everything, I do want to say a huge thank you to my patrons. You guys help make these videos possible. Thank you so much, and if you guys are interested in supporting the channel, head over to patreon.com/ClassicMiniDIY. Now, you might notice on the side of my wheel here, I've got a weird aluminum plate with some notches in it. Now, what this is an alignment plate, and it's pretty cool. Let me show you guys how this works here. So, this kit comes with 2 measuring tapes, as you can see here, 2 plates, and one of the plates actually has built-in magnets on it, so that you can put your measuring tape through it and it clicks into place and doesn't come flying off. This is something that you can do by yourself. Now, on the inside of the car, there is a small hole where you can fill up your steering rack with additional fluid. If you take that hole out, you can actually place a small flathead screwdriver, Allen wrench, a punch, anything that's small and cylindrical. You can slide down into that hole, and there's a small notch in the actual rack assembly, the piece that's internalized on the steering rack. When your wheel is perfectly center, that'll go down into that hole and hold the wheels at straight, or what would be considered the middle, the perfect center of your steering rack, so that it can be adjusted properly. So you might be curious, how do these plates work? First things first, you need to be on a level surface. Second, you need to make sure that the plates are all the way up against your tire. They need to be pushed up against, otherwise you're going to get incorrect readings on these measuring tapes. So I'm going to go onto the other side, push that up against there, and then we'll get some measurements. Now, there are notches on both sides of these, and you're going to need to run a measuring tape underneath the car and through one notch on the back side. Hook it into, just like this, hook it into the notch. On the other side though has the magnet, so it'll stay in place. And then you're gonna run these tape measures all the way out to this side, and we're gonna measure the front distance and the distance behind the wheel. And what that's gonna tell you is how much the wheels are this way or this way. If you think about it, and your wheels are bent out, a little pigeon-toed for example, there's gonna be a broader distance between the front ends of your wheels as opposed to the back sides of your wheels. And then on the opposite nature, if you have both your wheels kind of pointing inwards, you're gonna have less space in between the wheels on the front and more space on the rear. It's kind of the basic principles of how this alignment works. And I do want to mention that I believe this doesn't set the caster, nor does it set, and I know for sure it doesn't set the camber. So let me get these run through, and we'll get a measurement for you guys. Okay, and now with both of these set, what we're gonna do is take a look at our measurements, go ahead and give it a tug too, just on both sides to make sure that it's perfectly flush on the other wheel. You might have seen I also pushed on these to make sure that they were up against the wheel. And on my right side, I have a reading of 58.5 inches. And you guys are not gonna believe this, but the front is also set to 58.5 inches. I honestly cannot believe that this is in spec right now. It's kind of blowing my mind. Well, I was going to make a video and show you guys how to set all this, but my alignment's already set up. Well, let's jump under the car. I'll show you guys what you would need to do in the event that your car wasn't magically in spec after putting a steering rack in. I can't believe this. All right, so what you'll see here is your tie rod end. So these tie rod ends are what determine how far on or off or really aligned your steering rack is. If you spin it to the left, it's going to push the back end of the wheel out. If you spin it to the right, it's going to tighten it up and bring the back end of the tire inwards. So depending on the measurements that you get on those plates on the front of your car, you'll know whether you need to back it in. So bring the tie rod in towards the inside of your car, at which point your back end of your tire on that side will come inwards. Or if you need to do the opposite and bring the back end of your tire out, which will push this tie rod in farther away from the inside of your car. Pretty straightforward stuff. A lot of people think that the alignment process is extremely complicated, when in reality it's not. It's just about tweaking one setting, making sure that everything's right, measuring. So it's more tedious than it is difficult. But let's jump out and I guess we'll just wrap up this video. All right, folks, so this might be the shortest video I've ever made that's actually covering a DIY topic. I was really hoping that that would be more out of spec so I could show you guys this, but I'm also not of the mindset of bringing something out of spec just for a video. So if you have any questions about how this works, post them in the comments section, just in case you didn't feel like this really explained everything you needed to know. Also, if you guys didn't catch it, I did do a full steering rack installation video. That was what I was referencing earlier. You should find a link to that in the description below if you want to check that out and learn how to install the steering rack itself. It does appear that if you have a Mark II or later steering rack with the long style tie rod ends, it looks like 13 turns on each side to crank those in is going to be about a good starting place to get at least a base setting on your steering rack. It's pretty cool stuff. Also, if you have any interest in picking up a set of these, they're not expensive at all. I got these on Amazon. They're like $75 US, I think. It's just basically 2 big sheets of aluminum. You might even be able to bend these and make some yourself. But 75 bucks, what's your time worth? And it does come with 2 measuring tapes. So you should be able to, you know, get your stuff aligned, at least get the steering set up on the front, which is pretty dang cool. You might actually be able to adjust and set the camber as well. You can see there are 2 notches here. I'm thinking if you measure the distance from the bottom to the top notch, you might be able to get the camber setting. It would just be enough to tell you what degree of difference you have. Although at that point, I don't know, an alignment costs about 125 bucks. Might be worth it, depending on if you have a shop that knows how to handle minis. I have brought my car to alignment shops here in the States, and they're not great. I'll just put it that way. But otherwise, I hope you guys found this video helpful. And I guess until the next episode, and until I see you guys again, enjoy those minis and motor on.